Satyagraha thrives on oppression till at last the oppressor is tired of it and the object of Satyagraha is gained. Gandhi, Mahatma, Volume 6.
Let me just mention an extreme example of this principle that Gandhi refers to here. When, in 1942, the Japanese had invaded what is now Myanmar, which was then Burma, the British were terrified, and Indians were terrified that India was next, and might well have been. And incidentally, it was recently discovered that the British war plan for the, quote, defense of India, unquote, was to get out of there the minute the Japanese invaded. But that's a different question. The main point here is, as he applied it in this situation, let thousands of men, women, and children, unarmed, go to the border between Myanmar and India. And yes, the Japanese would wreak havoc and kill many, but he said, and this is almost a direct quote, or possibly quite direct, they would not be able to repeat the experiment. Once you bring nonviolence into the picture, people can no longer be comfortable doing violence. And so therefore, it's just a matter of time before they say, look, I'm fed up with this, I don't need to do this, I have an alternative.
Such a pointed idea here, very sharp idea, and one that is literally and ideologically painful for the people who are often involved, but that our ability to endure pain and discomfort is one of the strengths of this movement, because while forceful opposition, fascistic governments and movements that are based on oppression, they use humiliation, they use physical pain, they use confiscation, imprisonment. These are methods that they use to control the populace. And when the people who are being oppressed are able to bear that without hatred, without allowing the government to control them anyway through those methods, then over time what happens is the people who are doing those bad actions lose heart. They start to feel themselves humiliated because they're doing this and they want to get it over with and move on. But if you are the bigger and better person, if you are demonstrating dignity and these deep truths of the human spirit while you are being mistreated, then slowly people begin to change. That's that nonviolent conversion. You are beginning to impact the heart of the people who are doing the oppression. And so, for instance, from the Taoist perspective, we have this understanding that the water is the highest good because it receives, it changes, it moves to the lowest level, it doesn't need more, it doesn't resist, and yet the soft overcomes the hard. Water over time cuts the rock. And by embodying that principle, that quality of strength, we are able to overcome any regime, any force that is rigid and trying to use the nature of harm and violence to control a population. Even in Zhuangzi, he laughingly describes the tree that is hard and difficult to work with, and so no carpenter, no woodcutter ever bothers to chop it down because it takes so much time if it's always blunting your axe. In the end, even if you do cut it down, it's impossible to work with. And so that the ugly tree, as he calls it, the stink tree, it's the one tree that's left standing to flourish because it doesn't comply. It doesn't work in the way that in this case, the woodcutter wants it to. So why bother? And so in a way, the power of the ugly tree is what we want to make use of, the power of nature, to be ourselves, to shape ourselves rather than to be shaped, to always be standing upright, to be flourishing, to work with the sunlight and nature, to spread love and shade for the people around us. And something about that allows the world to conform to that structure rather than to try to force it to change, because it's just too much trouble and it changes the space around it rather than the other way around.
The rays of the sun are many through refraction, but they have the same source. Gandhi, Young India, December 3rd, 1925.
Gandhi, of course, is hinting at the most important application of this basic principle that despite the enormous diversity of human beings on this planet, not to mention other life forms, there's only one life spirit that enlivens all of us. And the more we can contact that spirit through meditation or whatever, the more violence will subside in our world.
Yeah, and of course, this spirit of life is the same spirit of life that we experience inside ourselves, that we are all one and the same. We are a heart family, as he calls it. Diverse and unique on the outside, which actually makes human society better and stronger, more resilient, but recognizing inside that we are all the same. That wonderful Indian greeting, which has maybe lost its meaning over time in popular culture, but namaste, that idea that that quality in me, that light inside me is recognizing, is greeting that light inside you. That what we are essentially saying every time we say hello is, I am seeing you from the inside rather than paying attention to your outsides. And what a wonderful way to reach out and to connect with the world around us.
Confession of an error is like a broom that sweeps away dirt and leaves the surface cleaner than before. Gandhi, February 16th, 1946.
It's a nice image, and the part of it I'd like to emphasize is cleaner than before. In other words, it's not a dead loss if we do something wrong. It can even be employed, manipulated, leveraged into making us aware of a difficulty in our own mind and absolving it, taking care of it, which is much better than just letting it be there. So it's a simple image, but a very, very hopeful implication.
I appreciate that so much. Again, this quality of confession, of honesty, of openness, of willing to be vulnerable in order to learn and to be our best selves, rather than to try to protect our ego or to protect those parts of us that are the least valuable, the least worthy of being protected. Instead, we allow ourselves to grow through open-heartedness, through the willingness to connect with others, to receive correction and suggestions, to try to, over time, learn a better way to be for ourselves and for the sake of the people around us. And slowly, over time, we become the better version of ourselves by being polished by the rough world around us, our edges and our sharp protrusions and the parts of us that don't serve us or serve the world around us. They are allowed to be shaved away, allowed to be worn away, because we're not protecting them by lying or hiding. Instead, we are being shaped and experiencing the truth of the world around us and expressing that honesty in everything that we do.
to live and move and have our being in nonviolence, even as Hitler does in violence. Gandhi, July 21st, 1940.
Wow, 1940. I would even say that we can and should ground ourselves in nonviolence even a little bit more than he did in violence, because there is a part of the human spirit that will never lend itself to violence, no matter how drastically we condition ourselves with lies and propaganda. They will always be lies and propaganda, and the truth has an edge on all of that, and therein lies our salvation.
Yeah, we can never compare honestly untruth to truth. They don't have a comparison. That's the problem sometimes with the discussion panels we'll see on media, where we'll have somebody who is talking about the truth, and then somebody who is talking about an obvious lie or conspiracy theory or something that has no evidence to back it up. And we put them on a panel discussing each other face to face as though they both have equal merit, as though there's something to talk about. One person is making something up, another person is citing evidence. This is not an equal discussion. This is not something worthy of being balanced. And this is the issue with violence and with lies and the willingness to propagate harm in the world. It doesn't stand on equal footing as the truth, as the way the world works. As love and community, one has the strength of the actual world, the movement of reality behind it, the movement of community and all of the people in the world. The other has the strength of one person's words, maybe a few people talking together, and their imagination, soon to be destroyed as soon as it is tested by the real world around us. So they have not the same equal weight. We can rely upon the truth and nature of reality to back up the science of nonviolence.
And if we go deeply into the matter, we shall come across men in every walk of life who lead dedicated lives. No doubt these sacrificers obtain their livelihood by their work, but their livelihood is not their objective, but only a byproduct of their vocation. Gandhi, from Yuravda Mandir.
What Gandhi is talking about here is the difference between our svadharma and our livelihood. We all have a particular course by which we can make our best contribution to peace in the world. That will bear some relationship, hopefully, to the way that we make a livelihood. But until the world is a much more rational and more peaceful place, many of us will have to separate those things and make a livelihood some way, as long as it's not harmful, and pick up our peace work, which is our real inner course of action, our driving need as human beings.
And again, this references this Buddhist ideal, this very important step that we make in our lives, where we develop a right livelihood, where our lives are based around our ideals, where they're in line with our larger goals within existence. Our value system is expressed through what we do in our livelihood. We make sure that we protect life. We make sure that we uphold dignity, that we practice and cultivate our own compassion, that we spread that sense of unconditional love and friendship within our communities. We develop that aspect of society, and we are paid to do it. If we can create a system of surviving that upholds that quality in our lives, that is a right livelihood method. And if we, in fact, live in the opposite way, then we need to find a different way to live. We need to quit that job if it's possible. We need to find a way to, in the very least, be neutral, to do something that is not against our principles. If you, yes, I'm talking to you, are working a job that is expressly against your values and principles, and from your perspective makes the world a worse place, either make an effort to change that, change what you do within that job, or to change how that workplace functions, or you have to leave. You have to find something different if that's possible for you, because it's damaging you and damaging the space around you, because of course they're all the same. Please do take the time to find your own right livelihood, to make sure that the way that you make a living makes you and the world a better place for all of us.
Man does not live by bread alone. Many prefer self-respect to food. Gandhi, Young India, February 5th, 1925.
If only people who attempt to reform the world and reduce conflict would be aware of the fundamental underlying importance of human dignity, of self-respect, and of how it is interconnecting all of us, such that the humiliation of one person is the humiliation of all. It's a very powerful motive, which I think we often overlook.
And one wonderful aspect of this is that it makes life so much more simple. If we simply cultivate dignity, we cultivate compassion, self-respect, we cultivate these aspects of our nature, because as we do so, inherent upon that, because it is our truest nature, we develop compassion, we develop love, we cultivate peace in the world. We head out and we take the time to make the world a better place, because that's what brings us those qualities of dignity and self-respect. And if we prized that over food or a nice car or a title at work or the things that honestly matter a lot less, then our whole world would be a better place. And certainly our lives individually would become much, much higher quality.
Ahimsa must express itself through acts of service of the masses. Gandhi, Mahatma, Volume 8.
This was an easier proposition to realize in Gandhi's time and place than it is in our very complicated and industrialized world. But still, the underlying idea is to ask ourselves not what can I get personally out of this work, but how can it contribute to the welfare of others? And there is a much greater need than ever for others to be helped in one way or another. So it's up to us to balance our inner capacities with society's needs, human needs.
And of course, ideally, as with our right livelihood, the needs of our day-to-day life line up with the needs of the masses. If I have a daily need for myself and I've arranged myself in relationship to the community in such a way that meeting that need damages the people in the world around me, again, clearly something is misaligned. And of course, we're not all free to make changes in our lives, but most of us can. And if we can align ourselves so that getting your needs met as a human also makes the world a better place around you. Getting your needs met as an individual makes you healthier and happier, builds community, builds relationships, heals your spirit, opens your heart. then I would say that the way that you are existing in your day-to-day world is a blessing to the people around you.
The German Jews will score a lasting victory over the German Gentiles in the sense that they will have converted the latter to an appreciation of human dignity. Gandhi, November 26, 1938.
The preceding statement was an appeal that Gandhi made that the Jews should not resist Hitler with violence, but should employ nonviolence and go to their deaths with dignity. It was, of course, a case of how would you employ nonviolence in the most extreme situation imaginable, one of the most extreme that we've seen in our lifetime. It's important for us to realize that there's a tremendous lot of work that nonviolence can do before things become this extreme. But on the other hand, nonviolence is never without some option, even if it's simply the final option of going to one's death with dignity. And Gandhi makes bold to claim that if we do that, we score a moral victory over our oppressors.
And may none of us ever listening to this, and may none of the people that you know in your world ever have to deal with such an extreme and horrible situation, the worst possible things that a human can go through. It's amazing that in even the most savage, natural jungle environments, if we can imagine, human society disappears and we find ourselves in the middle of the jungle or a desert. No natural occurrence could ever be as savage and as terrible as the things that often humans create for each other, including extreme torture and death camps. How do we create this? How do we keep doing this to ourselves over the millennia? We create hell on earth. And even in those situations, we can still cultivate compassion and love, community. We can do our best to be the best versions of ourselves. And I certainly have no idea how I would respond in a situation like that. I hope that none of us ever have to find out. But we do want to recognize that these things happen in the world, that there are people that are living who have experienced these kinds of situations. And if we can do our best to help heal the world, to make the world easier for them to heal, sometimes that's the best that we can do. And we can raise awareness that these things occur, and that there are better ways to exist, that these kinds of conditions do not need to be created, that they are something constructively worked hard for. Somebody puts a lot of money into creating these terrible situations. Somebody puts a lot of time and energy into imagining them. What if we put some percentage of that amount of energy into imagining a better world, and then put some of our energy in toward healing the damage that those people have created, to uphold human dignity and compassion and healing? It's amazing the possibilities inherent in that level of expression and energy.
The opinions I have formed and the conclusions I have arrived at are not final. I may change them tomorrow. Gandhi, Mahatma, Volume 4.
This was one of the most remarkable characteristics of Gandhiji, that he did not cling to his opinions, and that made him a much more effective worker in the social and the political world, and it also enabled him to progressively readjust his course to the truth. And that is such an important example in our world, where people get stuck to one ideology that may work in certain circumstances, but not in others.
This ability to become flexible in order to learn from the lessons that we are exploring in our science of nonviolence is an important aspect of any kind of science. We test a hypothesis, we discover that it's not working, we find a new hypothesis. And if we can express these conditions of compassion and open-heartedness and this law of the satyagraha, this energy of holding on to the truth, that means that we are willing to change because we are basing our opinions and our actions upon the truth of the world. That's what our goal is. We are trying to work toward what works best in making the world better for all of us. And the world will inform us what works best. Reality will tell us what it wants. And so by paying attention and saying, oh, that didn't work, we try something else. We don't cling to the dogma that we've created or the thing that we think we want. Instead, we keep working toward a better world. And a better world necessarily exists in reality, which means we have to pay attention to reality and adjust our ideas to fit to that, not try to force it to fit some imagination that we appreciate. Instead, rather than pursuing fantasy, we pursue the real world and we find out what works for the best for all of us.
Nonviolence does not signify that man must not fight against the enemy, the evil which men do, not human beings themselves. Gandhi, The Collected Works of Mahatma Gandhi, Volume 8.
This is the core principle that underlies nonviolence, that we are never against the opponent as a person. As I like to put it, we are never against the well-being of the opponent, which he or she may not be aware of, but that enables us to direct all of our energies against the evil, the injustice that's being worked. And often that has a compelling psychological effect on the opponent when he or she or they discover that they're not being diminished as an individual, but that we are in fact saying, this injustice is not worthy of you. We are actually praising them in resisting them.
We want the best for all people, including the people who might not be working toward our best interest, because we recognize that they are harming themselves as much as they're harming us, and they are acting out of ignorance, usually fear, trauma. Again, these are hurt people who are hurting people. That's how this works. And so we can see them as wounded creatures, in a sense, who are lashing out in the way that an animal who's got a foot caught in a trap, we move toward it to set them free, and this animal lashes out of fear and pain, desperation. If we can see the people around us in power, oppressors, people causing us violence, they are twisted up inside in incredible amounts of pain. There's no way they could act the way that they do without that, without scar tissue and calluses over their heart, without a cloud in their mind. They've been lied to their entire lives so that they can't even see what's in front of them, including a human being. These are people worthy of compassion, worthy of respect. We simply need to help them heal. They have to be part of our circle of compassion because they're part of our community. We need to uplift the entire community for a society to grow and for us to find a better way in our world. They are part of our world too.
I do not believe that an individual may gain spiritually and those around him suffer. I believe in the essential unity of man and, for that matter, of all that lives. Gandhi, The Collected Works of Mahatma Gandhi, Volume 8.
There's no way that I can make this clearer than Gandhiji did himself. I would go beyond saying he believed in and say he was aware of the essential unity that interconnects all of us. And as he says, not just us humans, but everything that lives.
To remember that we are upholding the principles of life, the principles of the qualities of healing all of humanity. And what we're doing here is we're working toward, as he says, the essential unity of humanity. And for all of our lives, for all of our sentient beings on the planet, to gain spiritually, to grow in this system that we are caring about, means that all of us are being uplifted together. So you cannot have one person losing and you gaining, and to be considered then an act of great spirituality or compassion. One of the ways that you can know if you're acting in the best interest of all of us is if you can see and look around that the best interest of all of us are being promoted. So continue your work. Continue widening your circle of compassion, widening the circle of your results to include everybody. And of course, this is an act of skill, and it will take practice to know how best to do that. So we will continue to fail, but we have to aim for the best. We have to aim for everybody healing together.
I am an uncompromising opponent of violent methods, even to serve the noblest of causes. Experience convinces me that permanent good can never be the outcome of untruth and violence. Even if my belief is a fond delusion, it will be admitted that it is a fascinating delusion. Gandhi, Young India, December 11th, 1924.
I think something we can take away from this is that even if we don't have a guarantee of success in nonviolent effort, two things can be said. By using nonviolence, we have made the world a better place at some level of which we may not be aware. And the other thing is, often we're in a position where violence may work and nonviolence may work, but nonviolence is the more attractive, the more real, the more humane choice in all circumstances.
I love, again, Gandhi's sense of humor here. Even if my belief is a fond delusion, it will be admitted that it's a fascinating delusion. And it's true, again, that our goal here is permanent good for everybody and truth versus untruth. And so it's hard to say that a commitment to the truth is a delusion. I think he's just being funny. And so what we want to do, the reason why we become an opponent to violent methods, is because we don't want violence in the world. Violence causes trauma and pain. And if we accept it as axiomatic, if we accept it as true, that violence damages people, including the people committing the violence, then it can't be part of a world where damage is no longer necessary. If we can become skillful enough at these methods, then what that means is that we are able to benefit everybody in every action. We develop the ability to uplift everybody, to make a choice where everybody is better off. And I think that even random people listening to this, if they pause for just a moment and imagine something, there is one change that you can imagine in the world that makes it better for everybody. And you can puzzle that out. You can pause this. Please do write it down in the comment section below. What's one change that makes everything better for everybody? How do we then pursue that rather than a change that is just better for me but worse off for somebody else. And if we continue to pursue those kinds of outcomes and get better and better at it, brainstorm it together, then maybe we can uplift the entire world together.
Every murder or other injury, no matter for what cause, committed or inflicted on another, is a crime against humanity. Gandhi, July 20th, 1925.
The core awareness, the vision of the nonviolent person is this human interconnectedness, and I would go beyond interconnectedness even and talk about unity. And ultimately, it leads to the realization that when you injure another, quote unquote, you are injuring yourself. That in reality, in the deepest spiritual reality, there is no other.
And I know that for some people, it is especially important to recognize that it doesn't matter if you experience spiritually that all are one. It's certainly true, and it's certainly a thing that you can recognize with a bit of practice and paying attention. It's not even that big of a leap to understand. But even if you don't understand it, and it seems like some distant idea to you, we can still look around and say, okay, our community is a community. Our community functions as a whole. It's almost like its own separate organism. And if I'm murdering and injuring, I'm damaging my community rather than healing and helping. And so if we continue widening that circle of what we consider to be a community, because everything affects everything else, those lines that we draw around a community are just invisible ideas, then we can recognize, okay, at some point it becomes humanity. How do I exist in a way that does not injure all of humanity? How do I exist in such a way that uplifts and supports the whole community without spreading violence and causing more damage? And so even if, again, Gandhi's very lofty ideals don't resonate with you, please at least recognize it in a local way, that it's possible to help everybody work together, help everybody heal together, even if it's difficult, rather than harming some people so that other people can benefit.
If one single satyagrahi holds out to the end, victory is certain. Gandhi Satyagraha in South Africa.
This is a marvelous statement of faith. I believe it, and it's extremely inspiring. And it does point up that when you enter a competition or a violent interaction, numbers become extremely important. But when you interact non-violently, it is the depth of your awareness, the degree of nonviolence that you can mobilize that makes the difference between success or failure. And ultimately, that degree, that is the depth of human consciousness, the depth of awareness that we can theoretically develop, is infinite.
I am also a grand believer in the possibility of the depth of our attainment, the depth of our insight as simple humans, that the power of seeing the world deeply, of understanding yourself at a deep level, the power of expanding your heart, of developing very strong skills of compassion and insight, has a very powerful effect on your community. Even if it's simply inspiring one other person, even if it's simply sending out this wave, the way that tossing a pebble into a still pond sends out waves that reaches all the way to the far shore. and down to the bottom of the pond. This is the way our world works. And if you can be that pebble, disturbing the complacency of people by sending out a sense of commitment to peace and justice in the world, toward a return to reality and sanity, that has to make an impact. And so we have to simply have faith that this is the way the world works. We do our best to cultivate ourselves, to uplift everybody around us. And even if we don't see the results directly in front of our eyes, those ripples will reach the far shore and be impacting some other person, some other sentient being somewhere. And again, we'll start that path anew for somebody else.
I do not believe in the accepted Western form of democracy with its universal voting for parliamentary representatives. Gandhi and Louis Fisher's A Week with Gandhi.
I just want to say, as a general comment before commenting on this quote, that, here we are going into like 300 statements of Gandhiji's. They all emanate from one principle, and yet every one of them is different and interesting and sheds light in a different direction. And I think that could only happen if the one principle involved was truth. All right, now down off my soapbox and talk about democracy. I think it's a very unfortunate thing that democracy is a sacred word and it evokes passions leading to actually death in large numbers in warfare. And yet, when you look back at the concept, it doesn't fulfill its promise the way it has been implemented. And that is nowhere truer, as far as I know, than in the United States with the Electoral College and all of these machineries that were necessary maybe 150 years ago, but are absolutely superfluous and deeply corrupt now, so that regions with fewer people get more representation, and so on and so on. Just to say, it is a sacred principle, but a deeply flawed application.
And again, as I've mentioned before, I feel as though I don't quite understand Gandhi's point in discussing democracy and representation, if it's just that it doesn't go far enough, and that by applying it this way, he feels as though people stop hoping for more representation. In this case, part of Michael's complaint might be the difference between a democracy and a republic. For instance, where I am in the United States, we don't have a pure democracy, we have a republic. We have an electoral college, and so as he's mentioning, small places get more votes within that electoral college, and it's kind of a mess, so that one person doesn't actually get one vote in the United States. It's completely different. There are people whose votes don't count at all because of where they live, and that is a shame. But again, I don't know if that's a critique upon democracy and more just upon the institution of the electoral college and some other ideas that, especially in the United States, are used. And so, again, if you don't mind sharing down in the comment section some resources that I can use to learn more about these complaints and what it is that Michael and Gandhi are talking about, I feel like it's worth learning about. And hopefully, I become a better scholar of the nonviolent arts through learning more.
The spinning wheel enables us to identify ourselves with chores. The millions imagine that money can bring them anything in the world, but it is not so. Gandhi, October 13th, 1946.
Yeah, whether we recognize it or not, since times immemorial, people have been identified, both in their own eyes and the eyes of others, the eyes of society, with the function they perform. So I used to say back in the day when people challenged me as a professor of peace and conflict studies, you won't be preparing your students for jobs. I said, I'm not preparing them for existing jobs. I'm preparing them to go out and create new jobs. And it has been recognized more widely, I think, since thinkers like Peter Kropotkin and E.F. Schumacher, that how people work, what they work at, is more important to their spiritual health even than the salary that they get for it. And great experiments that have been carried on in the Scandinavian countries to humanize mass production are working very well, but have not been adapted in other countries.
A lot of that, I feel, is this simple idea that we are what we repeatedly do, that how we spend our lives is the summation of our lives. And there is no real separation between doing one thing in one way and then going somewhere else and doing it the other, which is to say that the way we do anything is the way we do everything. And so if we are being conditioned by the work that we do to move in a certain way, to think in a certain way, to treat others in a specific way, then that, of course, is how we become in our lives. Our habits become character. And then, of course, from the larger perspective, character shapes destiny. It shapes how we are with others, which shapes the community, which shapes the society, which shapes the nation. And so by allowing ourselves to be shaped by wholesome activities, by gentle, practical things that move us forward in a way that would enable us to become our best selves and to relate to our community in ways that are wholesome and healthy, I feel as though that is a wonderful way to shape and spend a life, and calls into the need for attention toward those parts of our lives that may not be wholesome and may not be moving us in the direction that is actually beneficial for our future.
If each retained possession of only what he needed, no one would be in want and all would live in contentment. Gandhi from Iravda Mandir.
The mantra that he sometimes used here is that there's enough in the world for everyone's need. There's not enough for anyone's greed. And I think, again, this goes back to what we were just saying, and I want to emphasize anew the shift of emphasis from material possession and accumulation, which is the cause of so much conflict and so much violence, and originates in a complete misunderstanding of who we are. We identify ourselves as solely our physical bodies, and therefore we need to accumulate physical appurtenances, and that's the basic philosophical, metaphysical error, if you will. I call it an error of vision that leads to, by and large, all the violence in the world. So he's giving us a simple way out of it, if we will take it.
To recognize, as Gandhi and Michael are repeating over and over again, that there's enough in the world already for everybody. And in a way, to me, this is wonderfully hopeful. I feel like it is a grand success of humanity, of all of the work that we've put in as a species for countless millennia, always scrounging and striving to make things more efficient, to work better. And now we've reached a point where we actually can provide for humanity. And I feel like that is something worth celebrating as a species. I wish that we could look around as a species and say, wow, humanity, you did it. How many people over the millennia have prayed and wished for a day where there's just enough for everybody? And now that we're here, we simply are not able to organize. We're not able to share enough because individuals want more than they actually need. So now there's less for everybody else. And that's the greed part. And we have to recognize that greed is not a helpful thing for our personal evolution. It's not great for communities and society. And it is, in fact, a form of violence. And so if we can learn individually to not just feel content, but genuinely happy, deeply satisfied with enough, in Taoist terms, to zhizu, to know sufficiency, to know when enough is enough, and to not need more than we actually need, because it doesn't make us more happy and more content. We've just been told that it will. Set that false teaching aside. Learn to find contentment from within. Have enough, and then you don't need more. That's plenty. And then from there, move forward in your life, into your community, healing others. This is the way forward.
Society is sustained by several services. The scavenger constitutes the foundation of all services. Gandhi from Mahatma.
The term scavenger, which was current in his day, would be a sanitation worker today. And stigma has been somewhat removed because the job itself has been sanitized in our country, at least in industrial countries, with trucks and with refuse being carted away somewhere that we never see again. But it was just a very kind of deep recognition of our humanness to recognize that getting rid of waste products is a part of the life cycle of who we are as embodied beings. And I think that was really, in addition to, of course, the social stigma which appalled him, that was really the misunderstanding that he was trying to address here. In another way, he once said, someone who does not grow his own food will not know who he is.
And again, this is this return to just enough, this return to simple living, and to not look down on people who sustain that existence that you have. And a lot of this, again, is a reference to the caste system that India suffered from. But as far as I can tell, all cultures and societies have some form of a caste system where other people are held up and other people are held down and looked down upon. And again, this is a form of cultural violence. This is a way of making people feel bad about who they are, even when it's a necessary job or a necessary function, or they're just humans living in a way that you don't approve of. And in the very least, within the work culture, all jobs are necessary, even the lowly ones that require less education. But for a society to function, if a job is there and without that job, that society cannot function, in this case, like sanitation services, that means that job is foundational and important. And we should be celebrating those people for doing that work. And it is shocking to me that we decide that one person, because they don't have to get their hands dirty, is more important than a person that does. And I would like us to be able to recognize the opportunity to love and appreciate somebody who's doing a job that we perhaps might not want, because that means they're doing harder work than the job that might otherwise feel cushy and easy for us. So let's celebrate all facets of existence, all facets of culture and society that we use to collectively lift each other up, because all of us are in this together. And with any one of those links missing, all of it would come crashing down.
Sometimes non-cooperation becomes as much a duty as cooperation. Gandhi, Young India, January 19th, 1921.
This is the essential theoretical underpinning of nonviolent resistance, and it goes all the way back to some Renaissance thinkers in Europe and way back further than that in other cultures. And it's critical for us to realize, with all of the brouhaha about loyalty and patriotism, that what we are loyal to, what we should be loyal to, is the truth, not to any system or regime or people. And so that means that, of course, once we're embodied in the physical world, it means a balance between rejecting what's wrong and accepting what's right. Both are equally important, and he developed the way to resist what's wrong without adding to wrongness. That is the enabling genius of nonviolence.
I love that so much. Resisting what's wrong in the world without making things worse. Not using a small evil to combat a large evil. It's not necessary. That if we're skilled enough, if we have a better way, we can use a good to combat an evil, to use that kind of language. We can solve a problem without creating other problems. And it's such a funny thing that we often accept a smaller problem to solve a larger problem, when perhaps there are better ways. We're just so used to using problems to solve problems, overcoming challenges by moving the difficulty to somebody else's shoulders. I become richer and solve my local economic problem, but in doing so, I damage other people's lives and make them impoverished. Our entire economic system is based on that, and it doesn't have to be. This is a choice. And so if we can find a better way through, if we can listen to the philosophers and academics, the activists who have been trying to teach us this for so many years, maybe as a culture and as a species, humanity can move forward.
I am used to misrepresentation all of my life. It is the lot of every public worker. Gandhi, May 27th, 1926.
Social media has simply amplified this human failing, partly hearing only partially accurately, especially if we're listening to something we don't like to listen to, and especially if what we are saying to the world is challenging. And at its most grievous and violent manifestation, we see the assassination of figures who are challenging people to be better than they are. That has happened throughout recorded history. And until we get over that, I think it's going to make human progress very slow and very painful.
And always this habit of degrading people that don't agree with us, or using personal assassination, either literally physical assassination or just character assassination, as a way to combat an idea. It's called poisoning the well in debate terms, where instead of dealing with my ideas, you attack what you think my character to be. Or you say, I can't believe you because you are an other. You're not the color that I like. You're not the gender that I like, the religion that I like. Therefore, I can't agree with anything that you say. And this kind of character assassination, or again, literal assassination, this is a kind of violence. We have to work with the facts that are there. We want to work within the bounds of reality if we want our movement and the healing to function. And that means we take on all comers. We take the challenge. We do things the brave way. We look to see what's actually true. Is it true what this person is saying? Is their solution to a problem better than ours? We look at the facts. We see what's there. We move forward. And if we can do that, then everything gets better. And if we don't do that, obviously, things won't. And so often, especially through social media and this kind of function of the world, instead of combating someone's ideas, they attack the character of the person. or they say you're bad because. And that kind of movement, that kind of reasoning, to use the word lightly, never ends well for the movement that partakes in it, because it doesn't function as a useful tool to get at the truth. And what we want is the truth. We want to move forward as a community, as a people, to heal each other and to use whatever methods are the best medicine for that, to uplift all of us together. And we want to be able to look around and see the results of that and say, okay, this worked. Let's do that again. And to be able to look around and say, not so much, and then to stop using whatever method that is. Please do write down in the comments section what you think are the best methods for us to move forward, what have been shown to work, what clearly won't work. And then together, we can be part of this movement, and we can help heal the world a little bit at a time.